All right, time for the keynote. So, yeah, thank you. Start recording. So a few weeks ago, Carr asked me if I would do the keynote, and he told me I didn't know what topic to do, and he said you should do the importance of free and open source software. So I thought about it, and I couldn't think of anything good to say about the importance of it, but I could think of lots of terrible things about free and open source software. So I decided to do that instead. So welcome to the dangers of free and open source software, where you'll learn all about the pitfalls and how to overcome them. Free and open software is good. Like, I'm not denying that it's a good thing. It does a lot of good for the world, but it comes with dangers. I use free and open source software all the time. My computer runs on it. The games I play are it. The stuff I write is it. Like, my job is free and open source software, if I have one. But so it's a very good thing. Like, I love it. But there are dangers, and most of these affect me and some of you, the software developers, but a lot of it also affects your users, and even just people around the world who aren't even involved can be impacted by the stuff you write. So let's learn about some of those dangers and how to overcome them. The first danger I want to talk about is getting co-opted. The example I'm going to give is not a software developer, but a vaccine creator. This is Jonas Salk, and back in 1952, he invented the polio vaccine. There's a big effort by many people to come up with a vaccine for polio, which is, of course, a disease that afflicts many children as well as adults, or used to anyway. And when he invented it, he didn't patent it. He wanted it to be free and available to the world, which reminds me of the free and open source movement. And he was asked by a television show, this is actually a clip from a television show back then called See It Now. And the guy said, who owns the patent on this vaccine? And he said, well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Can you patent the sun? I love that. That's like the free and open source idea. It's like, this is information. How can I claim ownership of this? But it didn't work. Like, even though he didn't put a patent on it, his project got co-opted, and now it costs a significant amount of money to get one of these vaccines. One of the reasons for that is that someone came up with a different one. So he didn't patent his, but someone else came up with a different vaccine, and they did patent theirs. And because they could make money on that one, drug companies decided to use that one. And also, there were some improvements made. Like, the new one was better than the one he made. But your project can easily get co-opted, and you might make a free and open source software project, but someone comes along and maybe they improve it, or maybe they just rebrand it and they start selling it as a product. And then your open source contribution gets neglected because people like the paid one better. They can make money off of it. So that's the danger, and you should be aware of that. What's a mitigation for it? I'm not sure. I think this is one that you have to get resolved to, and just acknowledge that this can happen. There isn't a way, I don't think, to stop someone from taking something that you made for free, and then they go and sell it. There have been attempts. There are these things called defensive patents, where you create a not open source license, and then you only use it to defend yourself. So like, if someone takes your work, you can stop them from doing that. But then you're not actually writing free and open source software anymore. You're actually writing closed source software. So I don't know if there's a good mitigation for this one. But yeah, it can happen. Your project can get co-opted. Another potential problem is lost profits. So Volvo is an example here. They invented the three-point seatbelt, which you probably are familiar with because it's in like every car now. But they did not patent it. They left it open because they said it's more important that everyone have safety than that we make a profit. But there's a downside to that, which is the lost profits. If they had patented it, it probably would still be in every car because it's a very useful safety feature. And probably the government would still have required it to be in every car. But they would have profited from all that. They would have gotten the proceeds. And they didn't. They missed out on those proceeds because they decided to make it free and open source, or so to speak, the equivalent of that in the hardware world. So yeah, that can happen with your software. You can write some really good software and then release it free and open source to the world. And if you had just sold it, you'd have made a lot of money. but you don't. You lose those profits because for some people, including me, freedom is worth more. freedom is worth more than money. So yeah, that can happen. Be aware of that. A mitigation for losing profits. Well, there are several mitigations for this. You can still sell free software. You can write it for free and then make a branded version and sell that. You can sell consultancy around how to use your software. You can build in, like LND does this. LND is free and open source Bitcoin software, but they have paid services that use it, and like their Loop service. So you can do a model like that. There are lots of mitigations for ensuring that you can still make a profit while writing free and open source software. But it is a danger. You gotta do something about it. Otherwise, you'll just not make any money. Danger number 3 is patent disputes. Microsoft gets $2 billion a year in Android patent fees. The company who created Android is not Google. It was a different company, and they intentionally released all of the software for Android into the public domain. Not public domain, but free of copyright. And when Google bought the Android company, that original source code still exists. It's called the Android Open Source Project. Google still contributes to it. Other people contribute to it as well. And it's free. But Microsoft, they have a lot of weird patents from their history of writing operating systems. And I don't know what all the patents are, but here's an example that I made up, and this one's probably not true. But just imagine that Microsoft had a patent on like having an icon that you tap or click and it opens up, some application. That could be an example of something they might have patented. And so since Android uses that, even though Android is free and open source software, Microsoft can sue any company who uses it and say, you're not paying us for using our patents, our patented technology. So a lot of companies who use Android, in order to not be sued by Microsoft, they pay them licensing fees for software that's open source, free and open source. So that can really harm your project. I mean, it's harmed Android a lot. There are a lot of people who take Android and try and remake it because of to get around some of these patent disputes to reduce the likelihood of Microsoft suing them. But a lot of people just are like, I'm just going to pay the piper and pony up the money. So that can happen. Your project can get harmed through patent disputes and stuff. Be aware of that. What's the mitigation for patent disputes? Be creative. Don't fall into the model of making something that is. You don't need to fall into the model of making something that is familiar and like a clone of a Microsoft product or an Apple product or whatever. If you make something fresh and new that no one has a patent on, then you aren't subject to patent disputes. So that's a mitigation. Be creative in your design and in your code as well. Danger number 4 is code copiers. So this is a cool story. The Cold Card is one of the best Bitcoin hardware wallets. It's the one I use, and many people like it. They came out in 2018, and they got real mad when a competitor came out in 2020 named Foundation, who created a device called the Passport, and they used Cold Card's open source firmware. Cold Card had released that into the public domain, made it available for everyone to use, but someone came along and used it, and they were like, no, this is terrible. Why are you doing this? And they said there were reasons, like they had designed the software to be compatible with specific hardware. Foundation wasn't using that hardware, and they were like, this could pose a danger to users because you just ported something that wasn't designed for your system into your system. So they had reasons. But they got mad, and they changed their software license for that. And then it turns out Foundation came back and said, but you did the same thing. When you started, you used Trezor's open source crypto library as the foundation for your device. 'Cause Trezor was an even older hardware wallet company. So there's an example of code copying happening on multiple levels and people getting mad and stuff. It's the same mitigation as number 1. You can use defensive patents or defensive copyrights, that's why they changed their license. They're trying to defend themselves from people copying their code. But the downside is you're not writing open source software anymore. Whenever you try and say, I want to defend myself from someone copying my code, it's because you don't want people copying your code. If you don't want that, you're not a free and open source software developer. So you have to get used to that. Like it's the only mitigation for code copying is to embrace it and say, I want people to copy my code. It's a compliment, and it is it means I wrote something that people find valuable. So yeah, there's no mitigation for it, but just embrace it and lean into it and be like, I want people to copy the code because they will. If it's good. If it sucks, they won't. So. Danger number 5 is unpopularity. A lot of the free and open source software fills a niche, and often it's a very small niche. Maybe it's even just something that you really wanted to exist, and no one else has that use case. So it might not become very popular. And I have often felt, I'm not sure what the word is, glum, I guess. I've often felt glum when I spend a lot of time writing something and then no one uses it. So some mitigations for that are to remember that different people have different needs. And if you wrote something for you, that should be satisfying. Like if it works for you, that's great, and be happy about that. It doesn't have to match anyone else's needs. Also, the marketing budget is a thing. Like free and open source projects rarely have a marketing budget. Sometimes that doesn't matter. Like Linux doesn't have a marketing budget, but it's incredibly popular among developers. Another example would be like Bitcoin itself has no marketing budget, but of course we've all embraced it. Nostr, this happened with Nostr. It became very popular with no money. But yeah, that doesn't always happen. So just be aware that your project might not be popular. That is a danger, and don't get glum about it. Just write stuff that you like and that your friends like, and let that be your inspiration. And then the last danger I have on this list is your code blows up, and then it blows up. So my poster child for this is Enigma, because that's what happened to me. Enigma was one of the first Nostr clients, and it offered a chat-like experience that was reminiscent somewhat of Telegram. For a while, it was the most popular Nostr software out there, but I'm not a very good coder, and it has bugs, like very severe ones, like leaking your private key to everyone who wants to listen. So it got exploited, and so after it got popular, it blew up, and someone found a terrible bug with it, and so now I just put that warning up that you'll lose your private key because I can't be bothered to fix it. All right, so those are the dangers of free and open source software, or those are some of the ones that I came up with, as well as some mitigations for them. Oh, the mitigation for this one is learn to code, right? Don't follow my example of just never learning anything. Become a good coder. Come to Pleb Lab, learn from the greats, which is what I'm doing here. And my latest apps don't have this bug, so you get better. You get better with time. And the mitigation for writing bad code is just keep writing, and you'll write good code. Any questions? We got one.
Obviously your code blew up there for Enigma. Do you have any examples in your existing work that was the equal and exact opposite of that you found that was far superior than
It was something that I wrote that was extremely unpopular but bug-free?
that became more popular, and it just so happened that you were bothered for the time to fix any bugs that came about? Is there anything that was like equal and opposite to Enigma for you, even of recent memory by chance?
Well, yeah, I suppose very frequently there are bugs in my software when I first release it. One of the projects I most recently created, where's the F11 button, was inscribetheplanet.com, which is an inscription creation service. And when I wrote this, which is a tool for adding data to Bitcoin's blockchain, a couple days after I made it, I was fixing very minor bugs in it, and I accidentally deleted all the code. And so the page just displayed like a blank text file. And someone pointed that out, and they said, you deleted all your code. And then I went back and got an old copy of it and put it back up. But yeah, so that's an example. This has not become popular yet. It has just been launched. But, it did, it had bugs, mostly very minor ones so far. But I did accidentally delete the entire code base. So that was fun. Luckily, I had a backup. GitHub is one great tool for that, is making backups of your stuff. Any other questions about the dangers of free and open source software? What's up, Wei? Mm-hmm. I probably will not maintain it. I will probably abandon it when I get bored with that project and move on to another one. That's usually what I do. But part of the reason why I release stuff into the public domain is so that other people can do it. There have been code contributions, not by me, to that project, because all the ordinals people are wild about it, and they're adopting it and adding to it and making pull requests, and I'm merging them. So, yeah, there are maintainers, even if I'm not the one who's going to be doing it in the long term. Also, just a reminder, inscriptions are stupid, and I don't think anyone should. If your company plans to inscribe stuff to Bitcoin's blockchain, I don't recommend it. Try and figure out a better thing to do. I made that website as an attack on Bitcoin. So, yeah. Any other questions? Topher, Scott, what's up?
Lawsuits. So there's been some controversy that some of the warranties or basically the statement that this software is provided without any warranty is being legally challenged.
Yeah, I didn't think of that when I was writing this, but that's a good point. I will show you an example, because this happens with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, or I guess it's github.com/Bitcoin/Bitcoin. If you go to Bitcoin's GitHub and you look at its license, where is its license? Do they have their own version? Yeah, it's in the copying file. So they use the MIT license, which is, as it's described, short and permissive license. It only requires these things. You're allowed to do commercial use. You're allowed to modify it. You're allowed to distribute it. You're allowed to use it privately. You only have to mention that you're not liable for any software bugs. They mention that they are not, the developers of Bitcoin Core are not liable for any misuse of the system. I think. Yeah, in no event shall the authors be liable for any claim, damages, or other liability, whether in any action, tort, or otherwise arising from, out of, or in connection with the software. So you can't sue us. It's just like, we disclaim any responsibility for what you do with our software. Didn't stop people from suing them. So people still sue you anyway. And there was a judge in England who recently ruled that you can't just write that you're not responsible for anything and then pretend that's true. So the developers of Bitcoin Core are being sued anyway by some guy in England, and that's something you have to deal with. Just because you use an open source license doesn't absolve you from liability, even if you say it does. So yeah, be aware of that. That can be a danger. Any other questions? What's up, Jana? Fail a lot. I think if you keep trying in the presence of much failure, you achieve greatness.
Thanks, Super.
You're welcome.